Satan, Lucifer, Belial, Leviathan, Samael.
Welcome. This is Aleister Nacht. So in this episode, I'm going to talk about a very important part of the process, and that is the PDCA cycle, the plan, do, check, and act cycle. So in our first episode, we talked about the process approach, which the process itself is linear. We also talked about in episode 2 the learning process, and it's linear as well. And then we supplemented those in episode 3 with the Theban and explaining how that communication medium is used, how that works. And now we want to talk about a circular method, and that is PDCA. So PDCA is not only a circular method, it's a secular method as well. So it is something that should be applied in cycles at certain maybe milestones in the process. This is often used by the magus, and some of you are certainly going to be going through and becoming a magus in the future, and so this is going to be a great tool because it utilizes the capacity to kind of check the progress of your neophyte to see if they're truly understanding the subject matter or the ritual or whatever you're presenting to them. It is also a good tool to be used by the practitioner themselves because it allows them to gauge their individual progress along the linear cycle. And so again, if we were to look at the boxes for this, we would have plan, do, check, and act. Now I'm drawing this out as a linear approach. However, this really is more circular in the fact that it does this type fashion. And so as this process itself, the PDCA process, is actually performed, it is going to be secular in nature. Something else to point out is that along the linear path of your overall plan of action, you're probably going to have multiple PDCA events. So again, looking at this strictly from the aspect of a process itself, while the overall process will be linear, these circular methods will be incorporated, and they will be incorporated at different places in order to kind of check the progress. So that is the plan, do, check, and act methodology. Again, remember that the methodology is circular, not linear. However, for this discussion, we're going to talk a little bit in terms of how this thing is put together. So, first of all, we want to talk about the first piece of it is the plan. So, anytime that you are planning, obviously you're going to have some sub-processes for that plan. And you're going to have some ingredients that go into it. Like, for instance, you're going to have time. And you may have a fixed amount of time in order to complete the overall event. And so you're also going to have some materials that you're going to use. You're also going to have certain people that may be involved in that. Obviously, the preparation of a ritual, for instance, in a coven setting, you're going to have coven members that you'll need to coordinate this with and talk them through to kind of explain what your vision is and what you have in mind for that. Along with the materials themselves, this may include not only the things for your altar, but also the entire surrounding. So if you're going to perform this outdoors, you'll want to think about those materials that are needed for indoor or outdoor preparation of this. You're also going to want to think about what the overall method is going to be. So, in looking at the method, you'll want to identify what type of working is this going to be, what type procedural ritual are you going to use, what is going to be the best return on investment for this. Is it going to be energy working, or is it going to be a sacrifice, or what have you? So those are some of the things that you're going to want to think about in doing that. Again, the environment being a big part of not only the materials but the method as well. You're going to think about where you're going to perform this and who needs to be there during the event. So those are some things that you'll want to consider while making your plan. The overall event and the success of the event is going to hinge greatly on your plan. Because if you have a good plan, then obviously you are not going to be thrown off of your cadence if certain things change during the middle. You know, the saying, the best laid plans. Well, these things often do run off the rails. However, if you don't plan well and you don't plan for the contingency, then your plan is pretty much going to end up just a big mess. Contingency is a very big part of the planning. So asking the question, if blank happens, then something else is going to happen. This will allow you to plan using this if-then logic. If something happens, if we're interrupted, then we will do whatever. And so it allows you to kind of think your way through it and make sure that you're getting as much value as you can, and also keeping the ritual or whatever the particular operation is on track. And the only way to do that is through the planning. Now, once you have a good plan, the next thing that you're going to do is, you guessed it, do. The do is the performance of whatever is in your plan. And so as you have maybe in a certain manner recorded your plan, and your plan again contains a contingency, then what you want to do is you want to go ahead and put that into action with the do. The do, again, is performance oriented, and the do will often incorporate not only your plan A, but it will also incorporate plan B that comes from the if-then. Again, if you have not used this type methodology and plan for the contingency, then obviously when your plan does not go accordingly or the way that you think it should go or your expected outcome, then obviously you're going to be dead in the water, so to speak. You're going to have that if-then contingency to help get you back on track. And then also there's always going to be an unknown. So this is always the variable in step C, or in part C, is always the part that you were not able to plan for, because perhaps you did not think about that occurring, or it was beyond your control, or what have you. So at this point, what you're going to have to do is you may have to take on more of a ad lib type arrangement and just kind of work your way through. Again, the best plans are going to change, more than likely, in some manner. The ability to be able to implement plan B, super important. Equally important is that you're also able to roll right into something that you have not thought about. And this is often referred to as salvaging the do act, or the do step, in that you're going to actually salvage what you were doing and then try to make the best of it so that you do not lose whatever session you were doing. What you really don't want to do is you don't want to end the event and just walk away from it if you don't have to. And so again, this is a very important part of that in the do. I like to use the term rigid flexibility in rituals. Rigid flexibility. And, this sounds kind of comical. However, it does have a very deep meaning. The fact that your plan is probably not going to go accordingly, and you're going to have to ad lib, or you're going to have to make it up on the fly in order to complete it. But what you don't want to do is totally abandon this step after you've put a lot of time and planning and energy, and perhaps you have other people that are involved in it. You've done the very best that you can. You think that you have done thorough planning, but it just does not happen like that. But you do want to try to salvage something from that. So after you have done the plan and the do, what you want to do is you want to check. And the check is not only to see if you're getting the expected outcome, but in a lot of ways the check step can be used as almost a quality control check as well. So not only are we getting the desired and the expected outcome, but are we getting it to the quality assurance level that we are expecting? And so the check act is a very important part of the overall PDCA, and the fact that this is where you have the ability to amend your plan. And as you're acting and you're going through and performing the ritual, you can do these quick checks to see if you're getting what you need to do, and if you're not, then you can quickly revise that plan. And that's kind of what we were talking about in the ad lib portion of ACT. If you need to adjust your course just a little bit in order to get to the destination, the check phase is where you're going to identify that. Now, in checking, obviously checking is a good thing. However, to make it come to fruition, we're going to have to act. And so the act portion is what is going to take the check and turn it into something that you can actually do. If you're acting, usually the act portion is going to, in some respects, result in some kind of need for replanning or additional planning. And so by identifying it in the check, then you can start to replan in the act so that you can make that course correction. And obviously when you make that course correction, that's going to go right back into the plan phase, because remember, this is cyclical and it is a circular type methodology where you're going to do certain things, but it's actually going to happen over and over again. Now, one other thing to kind of keep in mind in the act in the replan phase is you begin to understand that a revised plan is important. But you may not absolutely make that plan here. Remember, you come back into the plan over here. What you're doing here is, again, you're adjusting your performance, or adjusting so that you can get that desired outcome and the expected outcome. So don't worry about trying to recreate and go back through the thorough planning, because that's going to happen over here. And remember, these things may happen over and over again. And in fact, if we look at the overall process from start to, end of whatever the master plan is, you're probably going to have these events happening all the way through the actual steps of the process. So you would have individual steps in here, but you would be doing PDCA. And in fact, PDCA may actually be sub-processes of each one of these steps as you go through. Whatever the expected outcome is, it gives you an opportunity to kind of prepare for that and to adjust before you do the output into the next step of the process. So I hope that that part makes sense to you, that we're wanting to kind of make the plan on the fly here, and then we want to flow back into an overall formal planning step of the PDCA. Again, you don't want to stop acting and create a plan unless the overall plan is so flawed that there is no way that you're going to be able to recover it. That would be something that you would have to make a determination of. So again, kind of keeping that in mind for your overall process, that you're probably going to have several of these events. They are circular, they are cyclical in nature, and they need to be done at certain phases, and that would be something that would absolutely be included in your overall master plan for whatever the outcome is going to be. So if I go one step further, and again, the most effective way to implement this PDCA, since it is circular itself, implementing it into the linear process and using a combination of linear method and circular method are the most effective. Now, as we talked about in episode 2, where we talked about the learning process, if we were to apply this to this particular model, then obviously the practitioner could check, or the magus. And remember, you may very well be trying to lay this out for students in the future. And something that students really want to know along this whole learning process is, when do we know, or when do I know that we are finished? And so that becomes an objective. And obviously the answer is, you know when you can correlate the information. But how do we truly know that a person is progressing along this process without incorporating the plan, do, check, and act cycle? It's a very, very powerful tool to use, not only for the magus to understand where the pupil is at, but also understanding if they are ready to go through this milestone and proceed on to the next milestone. Because if they have not adequately learned the material at the rote level, obviously understanding is going to be a disaster, because you have no foundation on which to build. And these things are just like foundational steps that are going to lead you to the overall enlightenment here. So again, if you're not monitoring that as a magus, then they're not going to be able to proceed along this individual line, because they're not going to grasp what they need. In other words, if they're trying to apply the subject matter but they truly don't understand it, then obviously this is going to be a failure. And you're going to have to drop back into maybe the rote level to see, do they truly understand it? So along this progression are these various milestones, and you need to take a look at these milestones, and you need to make sure that the person is in fact ready to progress along the way. If not, you may need to take them back into a previous step. And the PDCA is absolutely the best way of going about doing that. Now, it can also satisfy the practitioner as well. So as a magus, you may tell them that when we get to a certain cycle and we evaluate the PDCA of this entire step, then we know what the next planning phase is, and at that point we're either going to be planning to go on to the next step, or we're going to be planning to go back and pick this step up to make sure that he or she fully understands and has truly passed this point, so that they can go forward with whatever knowledge they need to achieve the next milestone successfully. So again, this is PDCA. It's a very powerful tool, and it's a powerful tool for the individual practitioner, and it's a very powerful tool for the magus. And I encourage you to incorporate this, whether you are along your learning journey or whether you are helping someone along their journey as a mentor or a tutor or overall magus. This is going to come in handy. Again, people want to understand what success looks like, and they want to understand when they are finished with a certain task or a certain event. And by incorporating the plan, do, check, and act, you can give them this model, and you can actually incorporate it into the plan, so that not only they know that they don't need to go forward because they don't understand the material, but also for you, you would understand that you need to keep them in a certain area longer before you allow them to proceed further. So I hope this has been helpful in kind of, along with the other videos, how you can apply this PDCA model, and it will serve you well. Until next time, this has been Aleister Nacht, Hail Satan.